"We wed as strangers," whispered the millionaire, "but destiny made her his forever." Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main characters. The grand ballroom was lit like a palace, chandeliers dripping with light, violins filling the air with a melody so sweet it almost hurt. Guests leaned forward in their chairs, eager for a glimpse of the perfect couple about to seal their vows. But the strangest thing was, in this wedding of the year, the bride and groom did not even hold hands. They walked side by side, a careful space of 2 inches between them, as if even their shadows refused to touch. The bride looked like a dream sculpted out of satin and lace, her veil trailing behind her like a river of clouds. Yet hidden inside her silk glove was something completely out of place, a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges, as if it had been kept close for years. On it was her teenage sketch of a wedding dress, drawn at 16, a dream of love that had nothing to do with wealth or contracts. The groom was a millionaire CEO, the kind of man whose face had been on magazine covers, the kind of man who made fortunes with the stroke of a pen. Tonight, he carried no warmth in his eyes. He walked the aisle not like a man entering a marriage, but like a man finalizing a business deal. And there, right at the signing table in the corner of the ballroom, lay the true foundation of this marriage. A contract stamped with red ink. Everyone thought they were here for a wedding. In truth, it was a merger. When the moment came to exchange rings, the crowd hushed, waiting for sweet vows. The bride's hand trembled as he slid the diamond onto her finger. He leaned close, his lips almost brushing her ear, and whispered words that should have never been spoken at an altar. "We wed as strangers." Her eyes widened, glistening with unshed tears. She did not cry. Instead, she lifted her chin, meeting his cold stare with silent defiance, as though telling him, "You may own this marriage on paper, but you will never own my soul." The guests erupted in applause, oblivious to the chill that had just descended between the couple. Confetti rained down, flashes went off, champagne glasses clinked. But beneath the glitter, the audience had no idea they were witnessing the most loveless wedding of all time. And that, dear viewers, was only the beginning. The applause from the ballroom had barely faded when the limousine door shut with a heavy thud. The outside world thought the new husband and wife were driving away into a night of celebration. In truth, the silence inside the car was colder than the air conditioning that hummed through the vents. She sat with her veil pushed back, staring out the tinted glass. The city lights flickered against her face, painting her expression in shades of sadness and resolve. She thought of the folded sketch still hidden in her glove, the symbol of the wedding she once dreamed of, but never had. Across from her, the millionaire groom leaned back in his seat, one hand tugging off his tie with sharp irritation. His eyes flicked toward her, hard and unreadable, before he finally spoke. His voice cut through the silence like the snap of ice. "Let us make this perfectly clear. What happened tonight was not a real marriage. It was a performance. You are my wife only on paper, nothing more. Do not expect affection. Do not expect love. We are bound only by contract." She turned her head slowly, meeting his cold stare. Her voice was quiet, almost trembling, yet it carried a strength that startled even him. "I never expected love from you. I only expected honesty. And tonight, you have made that very clear." He narrowed his eyes, mistaking her composure for arrogance. "You should be grateful. With one signature, I have given you a life most women would kill for. The house, the cars, the title, all of it. Do not forget why you are here." Her fingers curled in her lap, hidden beneath the silk folds of her gown. She wanted to shout the truth that she had agreed to this sham only to pay for her father's medical bills, that every dollar she received was already gone to the hospital. But she swallowed the words, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of knowing the depth of her sacrifice. Instead, she whispered, "I am here because you needed me too, or else you would not have chosen me." His jaw tightened. For a second, something flickered in his eyes, a flash of discomfort, quickly buried under disdain. He turned away, pulling out his phone, scrolling through messages as if she were nothing more than background noise. The limousine slowed as it approached his private estate, a sprawling mansion perched on the hills above the city. Security guards opened the gates, and the car rolled up the long driveway lined with lanterns. To the world outside, this was a fairy tale ending. To the two inside, it was the beginning of a prison sentence. When they stepped inside the mansion, the contrast between their worlds became even sharper. The marble floors gleamed, chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the air smelled faintly of imported roses. He tossed his jacket over a chair and walked straight toward his study, where stacks of documents waited. "You will stay in the East Wing," he said without looking back. "Your role is simple. Appear with me at family gatherings, smile for the cameras, and keep the press convinced that this marriage is real. Beyond that, we have no obligations to each other. Do you understand?" She stood at the bottom of the grand staircase, her gown heavy, her heart heavier. She wanted to scream, but her voice remained steady. "I understand, Mr. CEO." He paused, turning slightly at the formality. Her refusal to call him by his first name was a subtle defiance, one he did not expect. For a moment he studied her, as if wondering whether he had underestimated the quiet strength in her eyes. Then, with a dismissive shake of his head, he disappeared into the study, the door slamming shut behind him. She climbed the staircase alone, the sound of her heels echoing against the emptiness of the mansion. In the solitude of her room, she finally pulled the folded sketch from her glove. The paper was creased and worn, but the drawing of the wedding dress still carried the innocence of a young girl's dream. She pressed it to her chest, tears threatening but refusing to fall. Outside her window, the city glittered far below, full of people who would never know the truth. That the marriage celebrated in headlines tonight was built on nothing but a contract, and that the bride was already living like a stranger in her own home. And somewhere in the next room, her new husband sat alone in the glow of his desk lamp, flipping through financial reports, convincing himself that his heart was untouched. But the memory of her words, "You needed me too," echoed louder than he wanted to admit. The next morning in the mansion began not with warmth, but with contrast so sharp it was almost unbearable. She woke early, just as she always had in her modest apartment before this marriage. Old habits did not fade overnight. She slipped out of her room quietly, still in a simple cotton nightdress, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. The kitchen in the East Wing was bigger than her entire former home, filled with polished steel appliances that gleamed like untouched jewelry. She stood for a moment, overwhelmed, before reaching for a pan. The scent of frying eggs and butter soon filled the air. She placed bread into a toaster, brewed coffee in a simple drip machine she had found hidden behind an untouched espresso system worth thousands of dollars. She hummed softly, almost forgetting where she was. Then the sound of footsteps echoed. He entered the kitchen, perfectly dressed in a tailored suit, already checking messages on his phone. He stopped short when he saw her at the stove. "What are you doing?" His voice was sharp, as though she had committed an offense. She glanced over her shoulder, calm. "Making breakfast." He frowned. "We have staff for that. The chef arrives at 8. "I was hungry at 6, she replied softly, setting 2 plates on the counter. Scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. It was not glamorous, but it was real. He looked at the plates as if they were foreign objects. "You expect me to eat that?" Her lips curved slightly. "It is food. It will not kill you." For a moment, their eyes locked. Something unspoken passed between them, but he broke it with a dismissive scoff. He walked to the espresso system, pressing buttons for his usual imported roast. Yet when the machine whirred, his eyes flicked back to the simple mug of black coffee she had poured. Against his own will, he reached for it and took a sip. It was stronger than he liked, not refined, but there was a strange comfort in it. He set the mug down quickly, as if afraid she might notice the crack in his composure. Later that day, the contrast deepened. She insisted on walking through the gardens by herself, enjoying the fresh air, while he had a driver waiting to escort him to meetings downtown. When she suggested he could try walking with her just once, he stared at her as if she had spoken another language. "Why would I waste time strolling when I could be closing a deal worth millions?" he asked, sliding into the back seat of his car. She answered quietly, "Because sometimes, the smallest steps mean more than the biggest deals." Her words lingered with him longer than he cared to admit. That evening, they attended a charity gala together, their first public appearance as husband and wife. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the crowd watched every gesture between them. He placed his hand on the small of her back, the perfect picture of a loving husband. She smiled for the cameras, but her smile did not reach her eyes. At one point, when the crowd pressed too close, she leaned toward him and whispered, "You do not need to hold me if it makes you uncomfortable." His grip tightened instead, his face still carved into that perfect CEO mask. "We will hold this act until the world believes it," he muttered. But as he guided her through the throng, he caught sight of her gaze fixed on a little girl in the audience, a child clutching a balloon and staring at the glamorous couple with wide eyes. His wife bent slightly, offering the girl a kind smile that was more genuine than anything she had shown him all night. It startled him, that small act of tenderness. Back in the limousine after the event, the silence returned. But this time it was heavier, charged with unspoken tension. He finally broke it. "Why do you keep pretending to care about strangers?" She turned to him, her voice steady. "It is not pretending. Kindness is not an act. Maybe one day you will understand that." His jaw tightened. He looked away, staring at the city lights flickering past the window. He told himself her words meant nothing. But deep inside, he felt the faintest crack in the armor he had built around his heart. And though he would never admit it, the crack scared him more than anything else. The fragile routine between them did not last long. By the end of the week, the illusion of control shattered under the blinding flash of cameras. It happened one evening when they left a high-profile dinner together. Reporters had swarmed outside the restaurant, eager to capture the city's newest power couple. At first, he guided her firmly through the crowd, his polished smile never wavering. But the questions grew louder, more invasive. "Is it true your marriage is only for business? Why do you never hold hands in private? Mrs. CEO, are you really in love, or are you just after his fortune?" Her steps faltered at the last question. For a split second, the weight of their sham threatened to collapse on her shoulders. She lowered her gaze, overwhelmed by the sea of microphones. Then it happened. A photographer shoved too close, nearly knocking her off balance. Instinctively, she grabbed his arm for support. His reaction was immediate and startling without hesitation. He pulled her against him, shielding her body with his own as the flashes exploded. "Stay close to me," he whispered sharply, though his voice carried an edge of something more than command. To escape the mob, he dragged her down a narrow side street, their footsteps echoing against the walls. The driver was stuck on the main road, unable to reach them. They ran together, her heels clattering against the pavement. She nearly stumbled, and he tightened his grip, steadying her. They ducked into a small alley that led into a marketplace, still bustling even at night. Colorful lanterns swung overhead, the smell of grilled food and spices filling the air. For a moment, the chaos of reporters vanished, replaced by the ordinary hum of life. She caught her breath, looking around in awe. "This place is beautiful," she whispered. He frowned, scanning the crowd for danger. "It is crowded. Stay near me." But she had already slipped toward a food stall, smiling warmly at the vendor. She bought a piece of flatbread, steaming hot and simple. When she noticed a ragged boy standing nearby, watching hungrily, she knelt down and broke the bread in half, pressing it into his small hands. The boy's eyes lit up. He whispered a soft, "Thank you," before vanishing into the crowd. Her husband had watched the entire exchange, his expression unreadable. For the first time in years, he felt something stir, a strange, unwelcome warmth in the center of his chest. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was meaningless. But when she turned back to him with crumbs on her fingers and a faint smile, the feeling only grew stronger. "You should try it," she said, offering the other half of the bread. He almost refused. His pride urged him to scoff, to walk away. But her eyes were steady, patient, waiting. Against his better judgment, he took it. The bread was warm, earthy, and real, so different from the perfect dishes served at his banquets. He chewed slowly, as though tasting life outside his fortress for the first time. "Not bad," he muttered, though his voice was gruffer than he intended. She laughed softly, the sound surprising him. It was not forced, not for the cameras. For a fleeting moment, it was just the two of them, husband and wife, in a world untouched by contracts or headlines. But the spell broke when he noticed something on the ground. A small sketchbook had slipped from her purse in the rush. He bent to pick it up, flipping it open before she could stop him. Page after page revealed delicate drawings, wedding dresses, flowers, and fragments of dreams written in the margins. One line stood out, scrawled in her handwriting. "If love is real, no contract is needed." She froze, her face pale as she snatched it back. "Do not read that. It is personal." He closed his mouth, unsure why her words pierced so deeply. For the rest of the walk, he said nothing. Yet his mind replayed the line over and over, gnawing at the walls he had built inside. When they finally reached the car, the reporters had dispersed. They slipped inside, silent. The driver started the engine, but the tension in the back seat was louder than any camera flash. She turned her head toward the window, clutching the sketchbook tightly to her chest. He sat rigid beside her, staring straight ahead, but his thoughts betrayed him. For the first time, he wondered if the contract that bound them might one day be the very thing that broke him. The photographs from that chaotic night in the marketplace spread across tabloids within hours. To the public, the story was spun as a fairy tale moment, the powerful CEO protecting his delicate wife from the swarm of reporters. Headlines called them the couple of the year. But inside the mansion, the air was heavier than ever. He paced in his study, phone pressed to his ear as he spoke with his publicist. "Yes, I understand. The board wants us to show more unity. Appearances must be airtight. If anyone suspects the marriage is hollow, it could destabilize our investors." She lingered outside the half-open door, her sketchbook still clutched protectively against her chest. The reminder of him holding it, reading her private words, made her feel exposed. Yet now the world demanded that they appear closer than ever. The next morning, he announced the decision over breakfast. "We will begin living together properly. No more separate wings, no more avoiding appearances. The cameras are watching us too closely. You will move into the master suite tonight." Her spoon froze mid-air. "You cannot be serious." His eyes locked on hers. "Do not mistake this for a choice. If we fail to convince them, everything falls apart." That night, she carried her small suitcase into the master suite. The room was vast, cold, with towering windows overlooking the glittering city. On one side stood his polished wardrobe, lined with custom suits. On the other, an empty space now filled with her modest belongings. The contrast could not have been starker. Sharing the same room brought an intimacy neither wanted, yet could not avoid. Simple routines became battles of unspoken tension. She brushed her hair by the vanity while he worked late at the desk. He draped his suit jacket neatly over a chair while she left her sketchbook on the nightstand. Each small detail clashed like two worlds colliding under the same roof. But the outside world had no idea. In front of cameras, they played their roles flawlessly. At charity events, he slipped an arm around her waist, guiding her through the crowd with effortless charm. She leaned into him, her smile warm and believable. To strangers, they looked like a couple deeply in love. To themselves, it was a performance that grew harder to separate from reality. The breaking point came at a high-profile gala. Under the bright lights, she suddenly grew pale, her hand trembling as she tried to steady her champagne glass. He noticed instantly. Without hesitation, he set the glass aside and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You are not well," he murmured, his voice lower than anyone else could hear. "I am fine," she whispered weakly, but her knees gave way. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she collapsed. In that moment, his mask of indifference shattered. He scooped her up in his arms, carrying her past the flashing cameras and out into the night air. "Call the car," he barked to his assistant, his usual control stripped away by urgency. In the limousine, she lay against him, her face pale, her breathing shallow. He pressed a hand to her forehead, his jaw tight. "Why did you not tell me you were unwell?" Her eyes fluttered open, barely focusing on him. "Because it is not your concern." Something twisted inside him at her words. The truth was, it was his concern. Against every promise he had made to himself, against every wall he had built, he could not deny the fear pounding in his chest as he held her. When they arrived back at the mansion, he carried her straight to the bedroom, refusing to let the staff intervene. He sat beside her until she stirred awake, his usual coldness replaced by something raw and unsettled. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer made of ice, but of questions neither dared to ask. She finally whispered, "Why do you care?" He looked at her, the words catching in his throat. He wanted to dismiss it, to say it was part of the performance, but the lie would not come. Instead, he reached for the glass of water on the nightstand, pressing it into her hands. "Because you are my wife," he said quietly. "And whether we like it or not, the world believes in us. We must act the part." But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. His concern had nothing to do with the world outside. It had everything to do with the woman lying in front of him, fragile yet stronger than anyone he had ever known. And that terrified him more than anything else. The quiet that followed her collapse did not last. By the next week, the mansion was no longer a refuge, but a battlefield. It began with the morning paper. A tabloid headline screamed across the front page. "The CEO's wife exposed her shocking past revealed." He unfolded the paper at the breakfast table, his jaw tightening as he scanned the words. They claimed she had once worked in a bar, twisting her past into a weapon, painting her as a gold digger who had clawed her way into his world. She walked into the room just as he slammed the newspaper down. Her eyes caught the bold letters, and her face drained of color. "Where did they get this?" she whispered. He did not answer. His silence was louder than anger. The weight of his stare pinned her in place, as if he were seeing her for the first time, not as the woman who had collapsed in his arms, but as the scandal that threatened everything he had built. By noon, the calls had begun. His family demanded explanations. The board threatened to intervene, and his publicist urged immediate damage control. The solution presented to him was simple, ruthless, and cold: divorce. End the contract before it ruined the empire. That evening, he summoned her to his study. The desk lamp cast a hard glow across the room. On the polished wood surface lay a single document, crisp and final. She stepped closer, her breath catching as she read the title. "Petition for Divorce." Her fingers trembled. "You have already prepared this?" His voice was like steel. "Do not act surprised. This marriage was never meant to last. Now, it is a liability. Sign it, and this ends cleanly." Her chest tightened. She forced herself to meet his eyes. "So that is all I am to you, a liability." "You knew the rules," he said sharply. "No scandals, no weakness. You have broken the terms." Her voice cracked, but she refused to look away. "You think I wanted this? You think I entered your world for luxury? Every dollar you gave me went to the hospital, to keep my father alive. I never once used a cent for myself." His expression flickered, but he masked it quickly. "Do not twist this. You should have told me." She laughed bitterly. "And what would you have done? Believe me, or accuse me of lying, just as you are now?" The silence between them was unbearable. She reached into her purse, pulling out the folded sketch of her dream dress. With shaking hands, she tore it down the middle, the sound of ripping paper echoing through the study. She placed the pieces on the desk beside the divorce papers. "That was the last of my foolish dreams," she whispered. "Now you can have the clean break you want." Before he could respond, she turned and walked out. The door closed with a finality that felt like a wound. Alone in the study, he stared at the torn sketch, the broken lines of a dress once drawn by a girl who believed in love. His chest ached in a way he could not explain. He reached for the divorce papers but hesitated. His hand hovered over the pen, trembling. For the first time in years, the man who never doubted a decision found himself unable to move. And in the silence of his study, he realized that perhaps the real liability was not her scandal, but the truth he was too afraid to face. He was beginning to care. The mansion felt emptier after she left the study that night. He remained at his desk long after the echo of her footsteps faded, staring at the torn sketch of her dream dress. The pieces lay scattered across the polished wood like fragments of a heart he had crushed without knowing. Sleep did not come easily. At dawn, he drove himself into the city, unable to sit still. He told himself he was simply clearing his mind, but his car found its way to the hospital where her father had been treated. Inside, the sharp smell of disinfectant hung in the air. He approached the reception desk, his commanding presence immediately drawing attention. "I need the file for patient Thomas." He stopped, realizing he did not even know her last name before marriage. Not until now. His chest tightened. "Thomas White. Room 312. admitted 3 months ago. The nurse hesitated before nodding. Yes, sir. He was discharged last week. All bills have been cleared. It was a large sum. Your wife came in personally every month to deliver payment in cash. Her words struck him harder than any scandal could. His wife, no. The woman he had dismissed as a liability had been pouring every cent of their arrangement into her father's survival. Not jewelry, not designer gowns, not luxury vacations. Just Kiat. Relentless sacrifice. He left the hospital in silence, the truth clawing at him. Later that evening, when he returned to the mansion, he noticed her room door ajar. Inside, the bed was neatly made, but her sketchbook lay open on the nightstand, as if she had been too weary to hide it. He stepped closer, drawn against his own will. The pages revealed not only dresses but words scribbled in the margins, notes like journal entries, raw and unguarded. One read, "If one day he could love me for real, I would choose to stay, even without the contract." He froze, the weight of the words crushing him. She had never cared about the empire, the status, or the wealth. She had only wanted something genuine, something he had been too afraid to offer. Her voice echoed in his memory. You needed me too. He realized she had been right. He had needed her, not for the contract, not for appearances, but for the humanity he had buried beneath ambition. His phone buzzed, dragging him out of his thoughts. It was his mother, her tone sharp and unyielding. "This scandal is unacceptable. End it now before it destroys us." For the first time, he did not respond. He ended the call and placed the phone face down on the table. His mind was no longer clouded by the empire's demands. Instead, it was filled with the image of her tearing her sketch in half, her voice breaking as she called herself a liability. He realized he had done more than break a contract. He had broken the spirit of the only person who had treated him with unguarded kindness. As night fell, he stood on the balcony overlooking the city, the skyline glittering below. In the reflection of the glass, he saw not the invincible CEO, but a man haunted by the truth. For the first time in years, his walls crumbled. He wanted to see her, to tell her that he had been wrong, that he finally understood. But when he searched the mansion, her room was empty. Her belongings were gone. She had left. The silence that followed was unbearable. He whispered into the night, as if she could hear him across the distance. "If love is real, no contract is needed. And his voice faltered. "I want it to be real." The confession dissolved into the darkness, unheard by the one person it was meant for. The world expected a scandal, but what it received was a storm. Days after she disappeared from the mansion, the CEO called a press conference. The ballroom that had once held their wedding was now filled with reporters, cameras flashing like lightning as he stepped to the podium. His family sat in the front row, their faces set in cold disapproval. Investors lined the walls, waiting for a clean announcement of divorce. He adjusted the microphone, his hands steady, though his heart raced. For the first time, he was not here to protect his empire. He was here to protect her. "You have read the headlines," he began, his voice echoing through the hall. "You have seen the photographs and the rumors. And yes, I entered this marriage as a contract, a performance, a shield for my reputation." Gasps rippled through the audience. His admission was bold, reckless. "But what you do not know," he continued, his tone sharpening, "is the truth about the woman you have slandered. Every dollar I gave her, she spent saving her father's life. She asked for nothing for herself. She carried the weight of my conditions, my pride, and my cruelty, and she never once complained." Whispers spread like wildfire, reporters scribbling furiously. He lifted a folder from the podium, the original contract. The paper that had chained them together. He held it high so the cameras could see, then tore it straight down the middle. The sound of ripping paper echoed louder than the gasps. "She entered my life through a contract," he declared, his voice breaking but strong. "But I will fight the world to keep her by love. No scandal, no headline, no empire will change that." For a moment, silence reigned. Then the flashes erupted, the noise rising like thunder. Some shouted questions, others simply stared, stunned by the spectacle. His family looked horrified, but he did not care. For once, he felt free. Behind the curtain, she stood frozen, tears brimming in her eyes. She had not planned to come, but curiosity had pulled her here. And now, watching him tear apart the very foundation of their false marriage, She realized he had finally spoken words that were real. Her hands trembled as she pressed them to her chest. The man who once whispered, "We wed as strangers," had now declared to the world that he wanted her forever. And yet, a question burned in her heart: was it too late? The night of the press conference ended in chaos for the world, but for him, it ended with clarity. He had torn apart the contract, but the harder battle remained winning back the woman who had already walked away. He found her days later in a small chapel on the edge of the city. She sat in the back pew, her head bowed, sketchbook resting on her lap. The stained glass windows painted her in soft colors, fragile yet unbroken. He approached quietly, his footsteps echoing in the silence. "I did not know you would be here," he said softly. She looked up, her eyes wary. "Why are you here? After everything?" He swallowed hard, lowering himself beside her. "Because I was wrong. About you. About us. I let pride blind me, and I hurt the only person who ever gave me kindness without condition." He glanced at the sketchbook. "I tore the contract, but I cannot repair the damage unless you let me try." Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she shook her head. "You cannot erase what has been done. I lived as a stranger in my own marriage." He reached into his coat pocket and revealed a small box. Inside was not a diamond as large as a crown, but a simple gold band. "The world saw our first wedding as a performance. I want this one to be real. No audience, no headlines, just you and me." Her breath caught. The chapel was empty, except for them, the air heavy with unspoken hope. Slowly, she opened her sketchbook, flipping to the torn page she had once destroyed. She held the pieces together, the image of her dream dress restored, though scarred by the tear. "If we do this," she whispered, "it has to be forever." He took her hand, his voice steady. "Forever is the only vow I want." That evening, beneath the soft glow of candles, they stood at the altar alone. She wore a gown not designed by luxury houses, but stitched quietly from the very sketch she had drawn at 16. He slipped the plain band onto her finger, and this time, his words were not a whisper of disdain but a vow from his heart. "We wed as strangers once," he said, his voice breaking. "But today, I marry my forever." Her tears finally fell, but her smile shone brighter than any diamond. They sealed their vow with a kiss, not for the cameras, not for the world, but for themselves. Outside the chapel, the city lights glittered as if celebrating with them. Their story had begun as a contract written in ink, but it ended as a promise written in love. And this time, it was real.